So first of all, the classic opening slide of quality of life, yeah? And when they asked me to provide a photograph of that expresses quality of life for myself, I couldn't because I don't have a camera, and I'm just kind of outside that kind of a realm, yeah? So I decided just casually to use the first slide to talk about an image of quality of life. And then I saw all the slides yesterday, and they were all very like warm and family-based and human-based, and it made me laugh to think I'm going to try and describe quality of life with this opening slide. But it's actually also quite revealing as well. On the left is a photograph of me reading, taken by a friend, using, I think, some app on her phone that bleached all the color out. And actually, this is what I'm trying to do in my life. I'm just trying to disappear into a 2,500-year-old tradition, while at the same time being completely part of the culture I came from. Because I love the culture I came from. I like to read Heidegger, I like to watch movies, as well as do my Tibetan Buddhist practices, yeah? So this is me disappearing into something. And the opposite image is one of my meditation practices. It's Vajrasattva in concert. Vajrasattva is the Buddha of purification. And I love the fact that in this image, I'm nearly gone. I'm hardly visible. And what I'm practicing, what I'm moving towards is very radiant and shining, yeah? And this is a kind of a theme I want to include through the whole talk. This sense of a journey that I'm on, which is in my own culture and inside the Buddhist tradition as well. As I said, I'm reading a book there. Whenever I get money, I spend it on books, yeah? And then I started thinking about PowerPoint. I've never done a PowerPoint presentation before. So I was really excited. I thought, I can see all the images I love to see on a big screen, you know? I can talk about anything, basically. It'll be okay, yeah? So I just chose all my favorite images. And I chose one text as what I read about, the kind of things that kind of stop me in my life and make me feel focused and happy. And I thought, what will be a good text to use for a bunch of designers, yeah? So I chose this quote from a William Gibson novel, Spook Country. Somebody's working on a project for a slightly dubious character, but he gives them absolute freedom to do whatever they want on this project, yeah? Wouldn't you love to have a design project like this? No explanations, no goals cited, no budgetary cap, absolute priority in any queue. This is kind of how I feel like actually being a Buddhist monk, you know? I'm just wandering through the world, and whatever I want to study, I study, yeah? I get back to the forest. I've been living as a homeless monk in England for the last 6 years. And it's physically demanding, but I have so much freedom and time to do what I want, yeah? And so I just go back to the forest and study whatever I want to study when I'm out there. The rest of the slides, as I've already said, you know, I just chose all my favorite slides. And from this point on, I'm not going to talk about most of the slides, yeah? I'm just going to let them kind of fly by as I go along. And you don't have to understand them, yeah? You just have to stand under them for a few moments and let them kind of wash over you, and let them be a kind of a secondary voice in the presentation I'm making for you today. I told Stefan in our conversation in the summer that I would talk about the kind of things in life from a Buddhist perspective that you simply cannot design, yeah? And I want to begin with two stories. The first one takes place in Tokyo in 1922. December 1922, an enormous earthquake just happened. I think over 100,000 people died in this earthquake. And a 10-year-old boy takes his 6-year-old younger brother on a tour through the chaos of the earthquake. He takes them to see like the dead bodies floating down the river, the collapsed buildings, people staring into space, totally traumatized, not knowing how they're going to survive. He takes his 6-year-old younger brother through the chaos of an earthquake. Sometimes he closes his eyes, he doesn't want to see, and his older brother says, no, you've got to see this. You've got to face it. Don't be frightened, yeah? If you're frightened, it'll come back to you, but you'll overcome it if you're not frightened. Why he did this, we don't know. Later in life, that 10-year-old boy grows up, sinks into depression, and commits suicide, yeah? But the 6-year-old, little Akira, grows up to become one of the most amazing filmmakers in the history of cinema, yeah? Kurosawa Akira. The second story is similar. It's about a Zen teacher I studied with in North Japan 9 years ago. He's been teaching in this monastery for 60 years, but the story I want to focus on is 1945, again, strangely enough, in Tokyo. Japan's about to be destroyed at the end of the Second World War. He's seen so many people, friends, family, already died, and he just wants to help his country. Yeah? That's how he expressed it in the talk in the monastery. I just wanted to help my country. And the army was finished and the navy was finished. The only thing left was kamikaze school. Yeah? So he signs up for kamikaze school and gets shipped off to Manchuria, which was a Japanese colony where the school was. There's a photograph of him in the monastery, having his last cup of sake, wearing his pilot's uniform, and the uniform's an absolute disgrace. You know, it's just bits of leather sewn together. The poverty is so visible in it. He's already dead in the photograph. You know, he's completely blank, him and two friends, having their last cup of sake before flying out to die. And then, an hour before he's due to fly, the war ends. Yeah? Japan surrenders. And he's just about to sacrifice his life, and it stopped. He makes it back to, I could tell you a lot more about him, but there's no time to do it, unfortunately. But he makes it back to Tokyo at the end of the war, meets a Zen master on the streets there, who looks at him and says, I can see you've already sacrificed your life once, and it didn't work. Give it to me now, and I promise you, you'll have some kind of awakening experience, and you'll be free, yeah? So he trained with this Zen master, and within a year and a half, he had a profound awakening experience. And since then, he's just been teaching in this little monastery in the north of Japan, Westerners and Japanese, for 60, 70 years now. And I had the good fortune to study with him for a month. And God, those guys were really hardcore. I only lasted a month up there, yeah? Like, they would give me instructions on how to avoid frostbite at one point. And I thought, I think it's time to go back to India, yeah? So I left and went back to India. But he was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And these two stories I simply want to use to show that there are things in life you can't really design, yeah? If I asked you to design or to come up with a proposal to present me with a film director or a spiritual teacher, how many of you would dare to include in your proposal an earthquake, yeah, or a war, yeah? You can't design those kinds of things. You can't design those kinds of experiences. Buddhism teaches us that the causes and conditions for anything to happen in the world are incredibly complex and have many, many layers, conscious, unconscious, this life, past life, but infinite kind of collections of layers. And that designing things is not going to, I nearly forgot about the slides, designing things cannot be done simply in terms of a conscious activity. This line at the top is also a Zen poem by Ikkyu, 16th century Japanese poet. And I love the combination of the poem and the total chaos, yeah, in this. I don't know where I got it from, I just surfing the internet. I think it's from a movie. So one more story about Buddhist knowledge, actually, I want to bring in at this point. And that's, I was studying with a teacher in America, and he told me about life in the Tibetan monastery he was in. And they study for 20 years in the monasteries to just get the philosophical viewpoint correct before they start doing serious meditation. The first 4 or 5 years are things like basic Buddhist logic, psychology, how a monk lives, the monk's vows, and so on. And then, round about year 6, I think it is, they start on the wisdom teachings. And in Buddhism, they teach that you cannot escape from samsara purely on the strength of ethics, on being good, or on the strength of meditation. You have to have wisdom. You have to have a realization of wisdom, a realization which is non-conceptual. Yeah? And so when they start to study these texts in the monastery, they have this profound sense of devotion to them. Some of the monks go off for 6 months and meditate in a cave just to pray, to understand, to have the ability to understand what they're about to study. I don't know any college in England where the students pray just to have the ability to understand what they're about to study, you know, in the next 3 years. the relationship with knowledge is very different in the Buddhist world. There's a kind of harmony with things that are both visible and invisible. We study in the Buddhist path because we want to go way beyond the level of our imagination and rationale. My goal as a monk, my design brief, if you like, as a monk, is to completely end suffering, yeah? To completely end having this kind of a body which has zero tolerance for pain and which falls into unconsciousness every 24 hours and then collapses after 70 or 80 years. You know, Buddhism teaches us that we can transcend this. And if we're going to talk about, seriously, about changing quality of life, we have to have two things in place, I think. First of all, we have to know exactly how reality works, yeah, on all the different levels, yeah, not just in a kind of the scientific, materialist, technical level that we tend to focus on in our culture. We have to know how reality works completely. You know, what gave you this body, you know? What gave you this world that you've been born into? All of this. And we have to have an understanding of what a human being is capable of, yeah? I.e., what we can aspire to. If we have a sense of human being which is limited, then Buddhism says we will never actually succeed in ending suffering, yeah? We will never get out of here. And if we don't have a proper existential understanding of what a human being is, then our attempts to create happiness for those beings is never going to really result in any kind of definite, long-lasting help for them. So this sense of, in Buddhism, that knowledge is something that we have to prepare ourselves for, yeah? Lots of the time, the meditation we did this morning, for example, was a very small example of it. We create the virtuous energy in a lot of our Buddhist practices to just have a mind which is more stable, more open, more capable of holding ambiguity, incomprehensibility, and so on. Because the ultimate wisdom, Buddhism teaches, is a state of mind which is completely beyond the limitations of our imagination and our rationale. And it's out of that that Buddhists spring from. Of course, that's talking at a level which is probably outside the relevancy of a lot of the work you're doing, yeah? And I love the work that you're doing and the kind of projects you get involved in. I love the world I'm in, and you guys are designing my world for me. I'm just kind of wandering around like a stray dog, yeah? Following my own little Buddhist path and generating aspirations. But you guys are the ones who are designing the world that I live in. And I love that. But at the same time, I feel a kind of a sadness that sometimes that you're trapped within a kind of a pressure cooker where you're forced to understand problems in a very limited way. You're pressurized into being creative all the time, into coming up with solutions, coming up with answers. And I would love it if you didn't have to feel like you had to succeed all the time, you know, to produce things, to be on the ball, to have a career, to have a direction, to have meaning, to have success in your careers. As a Buddhist monk, I've chosen to live in a way where I'm completely free, yeah? I don't have any goals. Nobody's watching me, essentially. I have my vows to live within, of course, but apart from that, I'm completely free. And I would love to see a world image where designers and people who are shaping this world could spend as much time doing nothing, you know, as doing something, yeah? And I'm going to have to speed through some of these to get to my last quote, because I've left this one alone. I'd like to let you decide for yourselves how serious I am with this last slide I'm going to show you. Here we are. I'd like to suggest, in all kind of seriousness and playful at the same time, that at some point in your life you might consider this as an organizing principle, yeah? To just say no, yeah? To say no to the special offers, the 3-for-2s, whatever deals are offered to you, the project that is interesting but not really interesting, you know, just say no. And stay in that space of not knowing for as long as it takes. There's nothing wrong in completely collapsing and losing your way. so long as you have the motivation to find your way and to help every single being find their way further down the line. Yeah. I think I'll stop here because I've run out of time, but thank you very much.